Best of r/Tales from Tech Support episode 90. Subscribe for edit videos daily. Little backstory before we get to our Karen story. Not on mobile. English is my first language. Blah blah. You know the drill. I work in the corporate office of a fairly large-scale oil and gas company as an IT admin, but I've been doing IT work for the past 20 plus years. At the time, I had just moved over to this company from a smaller MSSP in the area, so I am new to the company. While I don't know every little in and out of the company workings, I can still fix simple issues like software lockups, password resets, and domain profile issues. Stuff like that. About 3 weeks after I start, the finance company gets a few new contractors as well. One of them is our Karen. This woman is the definition of computer illiteracy. There are 3 people that comprise the IT staff in this building and we all have our issues with her. The main issue being that she is needing a password reset at least 3 times a day in order to get into our financial software program. My manager, the service desk administrator, after 2 weeks straight of this, has just about had enough and he does not contain his temper well. So, he starts spending less and less time in his office. When Karen needs her password reset, instead of sending an email as per policy, she walks/waddles down to his office and sits at his door until he resets it, like he doesn't have anything else to do. So, guess who starts taking the brunt of her requests? That's right, me. Now, before I get to the main story, let me set up how my office is laid out. We're basically one long hallway on the top floor of a new work park building. Directly across from my office is both my HR manager and my CIO, who is the reason I was hired and how I got such a huge boost in pay, so he and I get along awesomely. One day, Karen barges into my office with, what I suspected, was another reset of her password. And, while I was right, she didn't appreciate my assumption. At this point, Karen has become more demanding and entitled, thinking we actually work directly for her supervisor. Not even sure why. Our cast. Karen, the entitled waddler with no memory. Me, your hero/stuntman. AHRM, awesome HR manager. Karen supervisor. CIO, my boss. Chief Information Office. SDM, my boss. Service desk manager. Karen, I need you to reset my password. Immediately starts to walk off. Me, whoa, wait a moment, Karen. I need to know which password you are talking about. Karen, huffs in disapproval, the same one I always have reset. Me, this seems to be happening a lot for only you. Let's try and find out why this is happening. Could you come back and troubleshoot this with me? Karen, I just need it changed. I don't have time to troubleshoot anything with you. Me, I understand, but I feel like we are just putting a band-aid on the actual issue. I want to fix the problem so you aren't wasting time coming down to our offices all the time. Wouldn't you agree? Karen, listen, do you want me to get her supervisor involved in this? Me, we can, but it won't help you get this problem fixed sooner. Karen, I'm just going to go tell supervisor you won't help me. Goes to leave. Me, no problem. Perhaps with supervisor, we can get to the root of the issue. Karen leaves in a huff. Now, I have to explain. She was not being quiet. And voices carry in this office building. Bad insulation, honestly. Within 5 minutes, my awesome HR manager walked into my office and closed the door. AHRM, sits down and uncaps pen to write in a notebook. So, tell me what just happened. Me, well, Karen came in and demanded I reset her password. Everyone here knows she's been having issues with it and I wanted to rectify the main problem. Karen was obviously having none of it and threatened to get supervisor involved for no reason other than to intimidate me into just doing what she wanted. AHRM, that's what I thought I heard. Okay, thanks for your time. With that, she walked out of my office and into my CIO's office. A few more minutes later, Karen's supervisor was in my office. She's actually really chill. Supervisor, Karen said you aren't helping her? Me, sorry yes, but that's not correct. I was trying to fix whatever password issue she has going on, but she wasn't cooperating with my troubleshooting. I understand. Would you mind resetting it just this one last time so I can get her working? She's already way behind on work. Me, sure. Here's the password she'll need to use until we can find the issue. I hand S the password. I've already changed Karen's password to written on a post-it and she's off. As S is walking out, CIO is walking in. CIO, hey OP, mind writing up an email of what just happened with Karen? SDM has been having issues with her, but had no witnesses. AHRM just came in and confirmed everything SDM has been saying about her. Me, no problem. I wrote up a quick email about what happened and sent it over to CIO, AHRM, S, and SDM. The very next day, I get an email to block Karen's email, computer login, and front door access. She was escorted out of the building 5 minutes after I turned off her network access. And, to top it all off, her password issue? As you may not be aware, when you are given a temporary password in this office, you are required to reset your own password upon login. I looked up the logs and she would reset her password correctly. The computer would eventually time out, but when she tried logging back into the computer, instead of using the password she had just set IT to, she would try to use the temporary password. It would lock out her profile in 3 tries. I should have realized that this was a full-on PEBKAK error. Problem exists between keyboard and Karen. Hope you enjoyed my story. Have a great day and don't be a Karen. Thank you. Next. We provide resellers with hosted VoIP and SIP trunking services. Here's a smashing query I got when helping them with a PBX query. 6 days since I last sent a response telling them what to check for their query. Hi Ulster Eternal. Can you send me the system login details so my engineer can get into the PBX please? Response. Hi, we don't actually have the login details stored. If it's a default, my ISP, install with no changes then it's as follows, user/password. You should have your own login credentials set up and encrypted on your own end to keep them secure so please refer to that. 1 day later. Hi Ulster Eternal, support person. Has M login details we can't actually access it, like can't get the login page to put these details in to gain access. Have you got a link for it please? The problem we originally had was web access wasn't working to investigate a divert and CLI issue. Response. Moron, this is what I was querying earlier, 7 FKIN days ago, on in the ticket. I don't have any remote web access connections to the site/PBX using HTTPs are blocked and no VPN or SSH details exist. It should be accessible via HTTPS// IP address 8088. If you want immediate access you can try a screen share session with the client directly onto the same network as the PBX. Do a network and port scan on the LAN and find out the IP address of the PBX from there and the port used to access it, likely 8088 over HTTPs. 5 minutes later. Hi Ulster Eternal. Got you okay thanks we'll try this. 20 minutes later. Hi, Ulster Eternal. What is a screen share? 30 minutes later. Hi, Ulster Eternal. Do you know how to enable HTTPs? I call them. Just go to a browser, confirm you're on the same network and simply type in HTTPS 192.168.1.150 port 8088. Unless it's been changed that's how you get on it through the LAN. No web access so don't try it. 5 minutes later. Hi, Ulster Eternal please help. I go straight to the client, open a screen share, check IP config. Oh we're on the right network. Genuinely thought that would be the problem. Maybe the IP is wrong. Initiate IP and port scan. Nope, it's the local IP we like to use unless otherwise requested. Maybe the HTTP's port has been CHAN 8088. WTF. Me. Excuse me, Mr. Client, was this the laptop that the other tech was using? Client, yes it was. Me, may I open your browsing history if that's okay? Client, of course. Nothing to hide here. Me, thanks. Look at recently visited addresses. HTTPS 1,921,681. 150 port 8088. How do these people get jobs in IT and telecoms that all require basic experience? The client is now interested in migrating away. Thank you. Next. I don't remember any other occasion that I did anything like this, probably just as well. My form of tech support is aircraft maintenance, working on fixed-wing aeroplanes and helicopters with a value ranging from mid-5 figures to mid-8 figures. They usually can be divided into airborne aluminium pit ponies or their owner's pride and joy. Even a business jet worth more than $10 million can be treated as a workhorse, while a 45-year-old $40,000 bug smasher may be pampered by its owner. This happened back when I was not as young and dumb as I was in my previous post, but nevertheless was still young, dumb and bloated with cockiness, confidence in my own abilities, when I was working for Dodgy Aircraft Maintenance Company. At Dodgy Aircraft Maintenance Company, the rules and regulations under which the aviation industry is meant to operate could be seen, if we deign to take the time to squint behind us, standing listlessly in the distance looking like Marvin forlorn and irrelevant. My colleagues and I thought we were shit hot. Looking back, I tend to the opinion that only the first part was accurate, due to the play fast and loose with the regulations culture that was imposed by the persons in charge. One of the aircraft we looked after, if you could call it that, was a twin-engine turboprop that was of a type designed in the 60s and which had been built in 1972 as an executive aircraft, but was now a freighter. It was definitely in the airborne aluminium pit pony category of aircraft. As a freighter, it flew day and night, so we saw a lot of it in the hangar, maintenance scheduled for every 100 flying hours, and we always told each other we'll catch up with problem the next 100 hourly, but we never did, cause there was never enough downtime scheduled. But I digress. I was at work at about 2100 one night. We ran 2 shifts at Dodgy Aircraft Maintenance Company, so that we could at least give the appearance of looking after the 10 or so freighters that came through the hangar doors, when a phone call came in from $Pilot. This was in the days when mobile, cellular, phones were in existence, but few people had them. Among the early adopters were pilots who flew shitty aircraft for a living. At the time I was several years away from procuring my first mobile phone, but again I digress. Pilot, aircraft registration, the aforementioned aircraft formerly used for executives, at airport on remote island, and the engine won't start. This was a common occurrence. This type of aircraft was full of electrical bits and pieces, and some of them were quite temperamental. Me, okay, what's it doing? Pilot, the engine won't even rotate. Describes other symptoms. Me, thinks shit. This is not the usual engine won't start problem. Let me look at the manuals and I'll call you back. What's your number? After performing the necessary end of telephone call things dictated by the situation and by polite society, I sat at the desk and pulled out the maintenance library for that type of aircraft, which consisted of a folder full of microfiche cards. What is a microfiche card, I hear you young'uns say? To quote Dean from the Curiosity Show, I'm glad you asked. Microfiche cards were /R/While Haven B postcard-sized transparencies that had a set of very small images on them, such that a document of hundreds of pages could fit on a couple of cards. The images could be either negatives or positives, and you put a card in a movable carriage like a big laboratory slide that was part of a machine that would magnify and illuminate the image so you could view the image as a projection on a screen, and would allow you to print the relevant page/s. Said machine being called a microfiche reader. I located the wiring diagram microfiche and put it in the reader, then printed off the start circuit wiring diagrams. The start circuit was insanely complicated and the diagram covered 4 A3 sheets of paper. I buckled down and started to study the diagram to ascertain where the volts went, as one does in these circumstances. Having formulated a plan of action to get $Pilot and his shitty aeroplane going again, I picked up the phone and called him. Me, hey, this is Gert from Dodgy Aircraft Maintenance Company. Irrelevant pleasantries. Do you have any tools with you? Pilot, a Swiss Army knife with all the stuff. Me, alright, we'll see how you go. I need you to remove the start switch panel. The start switch panel is a curved aluminium panel with 10 different push button and toggle switches on it. It is mounted on the center pedestal among the engine control levers, fastened with 4 countersunk 1032 screws. There are 2 big round illuminated push button switches to start the 2 engines. There are about 0.2 bajillion wires running to this panel. Pilot, after several minutes okay, I got the panel off. Me, alright, you need to configure the aircraft for an engine start. Turn on power and use the scissors attachment on the knife to jump around terminals. Let's say 1 and 3, it could have been 2 and 4, or 1 and 2. On the start switch, then push the button. Pilot, fiddle fiddle, push, it's starting. Me, now put it back together and fly back here to airport where dodgy aircraft maintenance company does its dirty dodgy business. Pilot, okay thanks. See you in a few hours. The volts went from the circuit breaker through the start switch when it was pushed, then on their merry way through the aircraft and back to the start switch, then out on their merry way again. Jumpering across the 2 terminals bypassed a lot of automatic stuff. It was enough to provide the necessaries for combustion. Air, starter relay closes, starter engages, engine turns, compressor section compresses the air, fuel and ignition, fuel nozzles start squirting, igniters start to go zap zap zap, fuel begins to burn, turbine section does its thing. I just want to emphasize that regulations forbade, and still forbid, both me and the pilot from doing any of what I describe above. The correct course of action would have been to strand the pilot on the island for at least one night while someone else. I neglected to mention that I was not a licensed aircraft maintenance engineer at the time and therefore could not do jack shit without supervision. Said supervisor was tucked up in bed at home elsewhere in the city. You could make the argument that I should not have even been speaking to the pilot. Flew there, diagnosed what was wrong, waited for parts to be shipped, then fixed the aircraft and cleared it for flight. The best part of 30 years later, I no longer remember what was the specific fault, or what we did to fix it. After all, the brain tends not to remember the mundane, doesn't it? TL. Doctor, don't do what Danny Don't Dose did. Thank you. Next. Actually, this is just one of several times I have failed to be showered with kudos. The original post was removed as it contained links, including a link to a news story that had gory pictures. There are some pertinent comments there. I'm not expecting any extra upvotes or anything from the repost. My form of tech support is aircraft maintenance, working on fixed-wing aeroplanes and helicopters with a value ranging from mid-5 figures to mid-8 figures. They usually can be divided into airborne aluminium pit ponies or their owner's pride and joy. Even a business jet worth more than $10 million can be treated as a workhorse, while a 45-year-old $40,000 bug smasher may be pampered by its owner. The events recounted here took place around the turn of the century/millennium, before I conned some of my colleagues into thinking that I knew what I was doing. I had been working on a Piper Cheyenne, a small, 6/8 seats, twin-engine turboprop. The RH engine inlet anti-ice system wasn't working. What is engine inlet anti-ice? I hear you say? To quote Dean from the Curiosity Show, I'm glad you asked. Technical information. Turbine engines, of which turboprops are a subset, have things inside them spinning at tens of thousands of RPM. These things tend not to like being hit by foreign objects, be it birds, bolts, bits of ice or, in one case I was told about, a key left in the lock of a nose baggage compartment door. If a foreign object hits the spinny fasty things, bad things can happen. Ice can form on aircraft because it's cold up there and sometimes it is wet enough as well. To protect the spinny fasty bits from ice, it's not possible to protect them from birds, bolts or keys. The air inlet of a turbine engine is heated to prevent ice from forming and building up, then breaking off in chunks and going into the engine. Usually the inlet is heated by hot air tapped off the engine itself. Next time you look at a jet aircraft you might see a shiny ring around the air inlet. This is the bit that heats up. Many turboprops have the same arrangement. The Piper Cheyenne engine inlets have a different system. They have a shaped rubber boot on them, with an electric heating element impregnated in the rubber, like a rear window of a car, but rubber instead of glass and in a ring with extra flappy bits to cover the inside and outside of the inlet instead of a flat sheet. The boot is glued on with an excellent adhesive made by 3M called 1300L. It turns out the RH engine anti-ice inlet boot on this Cheyenne was cactus and needed to be replaced. This is a pain in the ass job. For one thing, 1300L is a really excellent adhesive. It will keep rubber attached to aluminium at a speed of several hundred miles an hour. Most aircraft are manufactured in the USA, so in aviation we use imperial units, except in Russia and, I think, China. So good. The boot is often ripped to pieces during the removal process. Adding to the pain and the arsedness of the whole thing is the shape of the boot itself. It's a ring with compound curves. Kind of looks like a molded plastic dog food bowl turned upside down with the middle part of the bowl cut out, leaving just the rim part. Anywho, after waiting several days for the new boot to come from the USA, I got the old boot off, cleaned off the residue of bits of rubber and 1300L, and glued the new boot on, this taking much of the day. It was now time to test that the boot heated up. The Cheyenne maintenance manual says this is supposed to be done with the engine running so that there is some nice cool air being blown over the boot by the spinning propeller. I decided that turning the system on for a few seconds would be okay, so I arranged for a colleague to get in the cockpit and flip the necessary switches while I stood outside and monitored the boot. I wiped the boot down with a wet rag, to keep it cool, and called out to $colleague, on. Before I could react, all of the moisture evaporated off the surface of the boot. A bubble the size of a tennis ball appeared, like a kid blowing evil, black bubble gum, and promptly burst with a soft pop. The brand new boot, that cost about $8,800 in turn of the century dollars, was fucked. Enter the guy whose job it was to internally investigate employee fuck-ups maintenance incidents. I shall call him Thomas the Toke Marthajim, for that was his name. Actually his name was /Whilehaven B. James, but English names are often shortened, so that Lawrence becomes Laurie, Anthony becomes Tony, Alexander becomes Sandy and Justin asshole becomes CNT. Apologies in advance to people named Justin whom I don't know. But I digress. Jim had our backs against the depredations of management and steered his investigation in a certain direction, leading to the following question. Jim, so Gert, you felt like you were under a lot of time pressure, didn't you? An oldest lamp flickers, semaphore flags flutter, a Morse key taps, flares issue from flare guns and hang from the ceiling of Jim's office. Jim is very busy for a few moments. Dramatization. May not have happened. Me. Yes I did. Investigation closed. I then changed the boot a second time. TL. Doctor, look. Up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's Jim. Slower than a speeding echidna. Able to lift self-inflicted buses off hapless aircraft maintenance engineers with a few strokes of a pen. Thank you. Next. This is a small tale of some family tech support. It's not very significant, but it started out with my heart racing. I live about 1,200 miles from my father and the city I grew up in. My brother and two sisters still live there. My dad's about 85 and has had some health issues lately, and my mom passed a few years ago, so I have to say for about 10 years or so I've always had a little jump start when I saw the caller ID from my hometown on the phone screen, wondering who's in the hospital/died. I'm the computer nerd of the family and the go-to person when something's not working or somebody screwed something up. My brother calls the other night around 11 p.m. Now my brother rarely calls me, and especially not at that time of night, so my first thought is something that has happened to my dad. So cue the racing heart. He starts out the conversation saying something bad has happened, and immediately I'm thinking, oh, here it is. Brother, my son's name, was trying to do a screen capture of some medical documents for my wife, and he's afraid he's broadcast her social security number and insurance number on the internet. Me, what? What the hell? Brother, repeats problem. Me, don't you ever do that to me again. Next time when you call at this time of night, you start out, dad's fine, everything's okay. Brother, okay, but we're having this problem. It turned out my nephew, instead of using snipping tool or snip and sketch, used an online screen capture service and was freaking out when he saw that the image containing the SSN etc. was associated with a URL. I checked it out and saw that there was no information saved to the service. He hadn't signed up yet, and reassured them of such, repeatedly, because they didn't believe me the first 3 times I told them. I then went on to tell them how to do a screen capture in Windows 10, but it did take me a while to calm down. Thank you. Next. First time posting, but I thought I'd just give everyone a laugh. I am helping my aunt change her Canon printer cartridges over the phone, as I am the family tech support. Once they are in, after some struggle of trying to describe every detail to my aunt of what to do, my mother, who is with her and just as technophobic as she is, says the following. Mum, I think Canon need to look at their supposed instructions and get them remade as they are wrong. Me, why, what is wrong with them? Mum, well I've just gone through all of the instructions until I saw UK, but the writing next to UK is in a foreign language, so that needs to be sorted. I facepalmed loudly enough that my mum could hear it over the phone and sat in silence for a good few seconds before informing her of her mistake. Me, Mum, the reason it is in a foreign language is that UK is Ukrainian. You want, and because you speak English and it's the first one on the list of instructions. Silence on the phone for several seconds. Mum, oh, I was wondering why it was so much trouble. Just to be clear, I love my mother and my family dearly, but man, oh man, I hope everyone is having a good day. Thank you. Next. Got called into a local bar the other day. She was having problems with her equipment. Server, gaming server, modem, router, losing power. First thing I notice when walking in, everything is plugged into a long line of power strips. It went, APC to old power strip to new power strip to new power strip to new power strip to 2-prong adapter to 2-prong outlet. I told her she immediately needs to shut everything down before something bad happens. She definitely didn't want to do that. I told her she needs to get an electrician out here right away to put in more outlets on their own circuit. She didn't want to do that because her brother is an electrician and he wouldn't be able to come out for a couple of weeks. She mentioned that the reason there were new power strips was because the old ones started on fire. Why that wasn't the end of the discussion right then, I will never know. They figured that if they got more power strips it would balance the load. I noped out of the job, telling her to get the local electrician here yesterday. She actually did that. Had 3 boxes put in, each box had 4 outlets. She called me to disconnect all of her equipment and plug it back into their new homes. She insisted on having me do this right at 5 PM. I told her that her whole network would be down while I did this, during her busiest time of the day. Everyone was going to have a little patience. No problem, she says. Go to turn her server off. Installing update 1 of 180. Jesus Christ. It is taking a long time. Everyone is pissed. They could still run cards, but couldn't ring up drinks. She keeps checking on me, her demeanor getting worse and worse each time. I explain the issue. If they had rebooted the server every once in a while after they close for the night, this wouldn't be happening. Finally, she snaps, walks past me and unplugs the computer. Problem solved. I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. The last I had seen it was on update 100 something. I told her that at the very best case, she added a bunch of time to this project. At the very worst case, she just wrecked her server for the weekend. If not longer. No, guys, of course there weren't backups. She was very lucky that it decided to go option A. But yeah, it did add on a lot of time. When it was all done, she offered me a drink. I told her number. If I started drinking then, I wouldn't ever quit.